First, thank you, merci, Dr. Valk, Madam Board Chair, Madam Chancellor, Madam President, distinguished guests, faculty, graduates, family, friends, chers amis, dear friends, bonjour, good morning, quoi. To tell you the truth, I feel like I just traveled in a time machine and landed here and now in a totally parallel reality. 45 years and 2 months ago, almost to the day, I arrived on this campus as a student. I was 16, and it was the very first time that I had left my family and my French islands of Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon. My English was at best of the academic variety, lots of grammar and formal learning, very little conversational skills. From September to December of 1973, except for one short visit from a relative, I saw no French speaker and had to make do speaking English as best I could. I had to adapt to a brand new life, a new culture, and new and sometimes very foreign traditions. It was overwhelming at times, but when I went home that Christmas, I spoke English passably well, and it only got better during the second semester. As I sat alone in my single room in Evaristus Hall, especially on endless long weekends when all my friends had gone home, I had plenty of time to contemplate what I might do with my life. I was keenly aware, even then, that I had no particular ambition and no idea of what I would do. As French writer Jean d'Ormesson used to say, I had a taste for life, but no real use for it yet. I knew what I did not want to become: a teacher like my grandfather, my grandmother, my mother, even my great-grandmother, and I knew what I yearned to be: a writer. The negation of a very worthy teaching profession and what I considered at the time to be a pipe dream of becoming a writer was not much to go on. In fact, I envied those who had a plan and a drive. As an older friend of mine who had from a very young age a burning desire to be an orthopedic surgeon. At 13, he used to put his younger brother on the kitchen table and pretend to operate. I'm glad to say he left Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon at 16, like me, and became the top orthopedic surgeon in France, spending his life operating and teaching orthopedic surgery all over the world. No such luck in my case. And I can say that I remember worrying about my future and what would happen to me. My parents, particularly my father, had impressed on me the necessity to have a profession of my own so as never to depend on a man. On such things, my father was way ahead of his time. 45 years later, here I am in the very university that welcomed me to Canada and that is giving me this honorary degree, thus telling me that I must have managed to do something of my life. And so what can I tell you that might help you, inspire you on this momentous day in your life? Trust me, ever since I was told that I would have to deliver a 10-minute, hopefully inspirational speech to you all, I have looked back on my life looking for clues. So here is what I think I can offer as advice. Very early on, up to this day, and I hope until I draw my last breath, I have had a thirst for knowledge of all kinds. As I grew older, I also found that I was more interested in what was the farthest away from my literary inclination. There was my famous resolve in the late 1970s to read Stephen Hawking's A History of Time, in English, mind you. It was not easy. Some paragraphs I had to read 3 or 4 times just to wrap my head around the concept. I'm not sure I could ever fully understand quantum physics or the Planck wall, let alone explain it, but I did learn a lot. On a more mundane level, I learned how to sew. I used to say I was prouder of my sewing diploma than of my Master of Arts, because the latter was nothing more than what was expected of me, and the sewing knowledge totally out of left field. So thirst for knowledge, now and always, regardless of what diploma you are earning today. The furthest away from your field of studies, the better, because no one should want to be stuck on a narrow path and see the world and the universe from a single vantage point. From a very young age, I was also encouraged to be curious, very curious. Like most children, I always asked, why? But over time, this has become my favorite word. Why? Pourquoi? ¿Por qué? In fact, I have made my living by asking the question and offering answers as a journalist. And what seems so simple is not so simple at all. Reverence for the question why means going beyond a simple news item looking for all the facts. It includes trying to understand ideas and people that are totally removed from your own beliefs and always looking for context. Long ago, I remember reading the autobiography of great Canadian journalist and news anchor Knowlton Nash. He was a great believer in context. If you do not know that there is very little firewood in Japan and precious little for a cooking stove, he wrote, you'll never understand Japanese cuisine. This bit stayed with me. To give you a more current example, last summer, as you recall, lots of people in Canada died from heat strokes, many of them in the province of Quebec. But why so many deaths in Quebec and not in neighboring Ontario? It turns out that only Quebec is keeping count and is forced by law to make the numbers of victims of heat waves public. Until you know that part, you would be entitled to think that Quebec was negligent or at the very least ill-prepared to face the situation. So before you come to any definite conclusion on anything, before you follow the crowds or let yourself be led by superiors, elected official, or anyone else, ask why and look for context. I do not have a single scientific bone in my body. Give me sonnets, music, novels, news, philosophy, any day. But numbers, algebra, and geometry are not for me. Yet, I share one characteristic with all scientists out there, an analytical mind. My upbringing, my school, and this university, among other institutions of higher learning, made sure I developed that capacity for analysis. It is, in my view, the single most important tool you can develop and nurture. It has always been good and useful to be able to think independently and with rigor, but today it is essential protection against the many modern perils of our society, against the real, if I may use the term, the real fake news, despotic tendencies of silly presidents, populist mobs, and demagogues. In my view, today, the ability to analyze is the only thing standing in the way of darkness and blind submission to power. The diploma you receive today may indicate what career you choose, but first and foremost, you are a human being, a member of a family, a citizen, an elector, a member of a community. And the most important thing you can do is to use your power of reflection and analysis to think for yourself, stand up for yourself, and sometimes stand up for others. I have done many things in my life so far, apparently, and I am far from finished. I did become a teacher for adults teaching English as a second language because the Vietnamese refugees landed in Newfoundland in 1979 and teachers were needed. I became a journalist because I love to write, tell stories, and ask why. And I have become a writer for the same reason. I became an advocate for the Acadian people because there was a need for a strong voice in the francophonie. In other words, I have done many different things as need and opportunity dictated. Chances are you will too. And you better be prepared to change your occupation and the direction of your career a few times during your lifetime. It used to be the sign of an ill-realized career to change track this way. Now it is a sign of adaptability, creativity, and resourcefulness. If and when the time comes, embrace it. And finally, one last bit of advice. Care and act on it. I started to write because I cared about my family, my roots, my heritage, and felt the need to preserve our family's history. I keep on writing stories because I care about the people I write about, whether real or imagined. I went into journalism because I care about the truth, about explaining facts, and because I care about people. I care about the people my dear Radio-Canada mentor, James Bamber, used to call the real people, the ones who are not paid to answer our questions. And finally, I became active in the francophonie because I care about the rights and the plight of minorities, and because I believe that societies are judged by the way we treat them. You cannot ever go wrong by caring. Let this be the basis of everything else you do, because to care is to want to understand others, it is to question injustice, it is to use your brain to help your fellow human beings, it is to be curious of the circumstances and hardship of other people. And because in the end, caring and acting accordingly is what gives purpose to a life well lived. Merci. Thank you very much.